Hey everybody, and welcome to our latest Skewedcast. This is Gareth at Skewed and Reviewed. You can catch us each week, not only doing our Skewedcast anytime online at sknr.net. You can catch me weekly on BJ Shea's Geek Nation on KISW-FM. Simply go to our page and check out the simulcast, or you can go to KISW.com, look at BJ and Mig's morning show, and follow it to the Geek Nation. My segments are usually up every Friday morning. And if that's not enough for you and you like the print, we have 8 newspapers that we appear in, and you can usually catch them online at pinalcentral.com, P-I-N-A-L, just look up keyword skewed. And of course, there is our quarterly magazine, which is available. We cover all things movies, games, television, pop culture, conventions, travel, and more. We've got a lot of great stuff coming up. And right now we're in between shows. Michael and I just finished the Consumer Electronics Show a couple weeks ago. We had PAX South, where we had Christine and Alexander covering last week. We have a few things coming up, such as Cinemacon, WonderCon, Toy Fair New York, lots of stuff like that. We'll be covering those in a bit, and we're going to be talking about Cinemacon tonight. We also have someone who's planning to cover Star Wars Celebration, and we're looking forward to that. But I'm going to start off with a little bit of hardware and some movie stuff before we get into the main discussion, where we're going to talk about the Anthem Demo that was this weekend, as well as some news from Cinemacon. So trying this with the video camera, we normally just talk about them. This is the brand new Scooby-Doo Curse of the 13th Ghost, and usually we do a lot of coverage with them. We often meet with the folks from Warner Home Video at WonderCon, San Diego Comic-Con, stuff like this. But this is the latest Scooby-Doo film, and of course it comes with bonus features such as vintage cartoons and more. So if you want a really good Scooby-Doo experience, definitely check this out. It's always fun to see one of the latest things from the gang. Now, new piece of hardware. We learned about this at Consumer Electronics Show, and getting ready to give this a try. This is the Sound Blaster XG6. Now, this interesting piece of hardware is an external sound card. You do not need to crack the case, pop it into the slot, because the video cards, which we're going to talk about later, are taking up more and more space. As you can see, you got your space for your microphone, you got your space for your headphone, you've got optical line in and out, and then of course you've got your sets here, connected through a USB cable. Now, I was hoping to do a review for you, but we're going to have that in a week or two, because my headphones are all USB, so I need to get a jack adapter so I can plug it in and go to here. But as you can see, you got a volume control knob here and such, and it probably doesn't show up too well here, but you have buttons and settings here. So when we do our full in-depth review, basically this gives you the power of a Sound Blaster that you can plug into your PC. Now, why go for an external card? Well, one of the advantages to this little fella is that you can hook it up to your gaming consoles as well. So if you want to increase the sound in your consoles, you want to increase the sound in your Switch, you want to increase your sound in the PC, you can do that. And our final bits of hardware, I've not had a chance to even try these out. Like so new, still in the box here. We have the new MM830 mouse from Cooler Master. Check that out. 16.7 million RGB illumination. So very curious to see how that will play out. It looks quite good. And then this one here is very exciting. This is the CK530 Rgb Mechanical Keyboard. It lights up. Listen to those switches right near the mic. Not too bad for mechanical. So we're going to be doing testing on those very soon, and a lot more. The final things I wanted to mention is we currently have some stuff from Vivitar under testing right now, including a new security webcam, which is great. We stick it right in the middle. It rotates back and forth, day and night cycle, microphone, record to the cloud or record to the card. Zoom, it definitely was really nice to check up on the progress of packages. One of which is we had a movie screening the other night for a movie I'm not allowed to talk about until tomorrow morning because of the embargo. But we had a video card that's been sent to us from Zotac. It's a GeForce 2070. Well, as the fates had it, the entire staff was away. We're away at the screener, and here I am worried about this card sitting on our porch. Well, sure enough, with this video camera, I was able to keep an eye on it. No problem at all, and everything was there waiting for us, as well as some other things when we got home. And then, of course, there's this brand new 4K sports cam I'm really anxious to try out when we get to the conventions and when we get to things. So a lot of stuff. Okay, guys, so enough on the hardware. Let's talk about the Anthem demo that happened this weekend. Michael, I understand it didn't go as well as people had anticipated, so what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, sadly, there's lots of issues that were reported. Everything from not being able to get into the game, it was disconnecting. There were people that talked about infinite load screens, so they'd go from one area to another, and they would sit there indefinitely with the load screens. There were issues with entitlements for people to be able to get into the game. Even those that had pre-ordered it, had the VIP, were supposed to have the VP demo access, weren't able to connect, or they were told they didn't have access to VP demo. So just sadly, for a game that I was really hoping would do well, and I get it, it's a demo, it's not final product. We expect to have some issues when we're talking alpha/beta type releases, but they've even come back and said this wasn't an issue with too many people logging in, because they said they were prepared for that, but it had more of an issue of all the people trying to log in at the same time simultaneously when it started. Then they said things were fixed, and then a lot of people reported those same problems were still not fixed. So sadly, not for those who are looking forward to getting a little Anthem in this weekend for part of the demo, it didn't go as well as I think they had hoped.
Yep, and Justin, we're going to get your, why don't we go for your, I'll do my bit in a moment on this, but Justin, why don't you go ahead and tell us your thoughts on this whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think Michael summed it up very well. And I think what this sort of comes down to is, you have to kind of remember that this isn't exactly BioWare's, they're not super comfortable in the multiplayer environment. You kind of saw kind of similar things when, other studios that are mostly known for single player experiences, they kind of make their foray into massively multiplayer environments, and you kind of just have to expect that something like this is going to happen. I know that BioWare, their name is on the Star Wars MMO, the Old Republic, but this is the BioWare proper. This is the Mass Effect BioWare. So this is very new to them, this kind of game in this kind of environment. The first Destiny, if you remember, launched with some networking issues, and maybe not as bad as like this demo, but Bungie, they were very experienced in multiplayer, but much more of like a small scale, like Call of Duty arena kind of style multiplayer with the Halo titles. Destiny was very new to them. And they definitely launched Destiny 2 in much better state than Destiny 1 was launched as far as networking is concerned. So I think they'll probably get this. This is one of those situations where it seems like they could get a handle on this over the course of a few patches. If people are kind of concerned with the networking, I would maybe wait until they kind of figure this out. I think it's safe to say that when this game does launch, that there probably will be some networking issues, maybe not as bad as this demo. Hopefully they'll kind of take some feedback from the networking issues and kind of, are more prepared for the actual game's launch. But I would say, just from experience with a lot of very big launches like this, I would say it's a safe bet that there's probably going to be some networking issues when it launches. So if it's going to be a concern for some people, maybe wait till those are all patched out.
Yeah, it's interesting because my experience was I played the previous version of this and I couldn't say anything because I was under an embargo. I think in some ways it's still in effect, but essentially since the new play session wasn't under the embargo, I could probably talk about it a bit. Now, when I played it, I saw issues, but it was an extremely early access. Now, my personal experience was that I was sent a code from NVIDIA saying, okay, here it is. Now, think about this. This had not been sitting in my inbox. This had not been sitting in the server. I had refreshed, nothing. And like 30 seconds later, I refreshed, the thing came in. I went to redeem it, and it said, sorry, out of stock, 30 seconds after the email came in. So, I couldn't even get in to register for it after being sent a code saying, yeah, you're all set, you can come in and play. Now, what I look at it is I go, people are getting upset over not being able to connect to an early version of a game. This is why they have these things, to figure out these problems. What I see is it's an example of a larger issue. Last week we spoke about EA canceling the Star Wars game, the open world one that, essentially Star Wars Uncharted as it had been named in some circles. Now we talked about Battlefield 5 is apparently not sold as well as they'd hoped. Mass Effect Andromeda didn't get the reception that they had hoped for. Star Wars Battlefront 2, we know about the issues with that. Then you have the whole issue with Visceral being closed down, so on and so forth. Now, it seems like there is a segment of the media, the gaming public, that is ready to jump on EA for anything. And they've set their sights on Anthem, basically saying, this is it, they can't afford a bad launch to this game. And so when something like this, which essentially I think they are looking at a franchise, they are looking at multiple titles over the future for this, and it seems like the public is already upset. Now, we saw what happened when a public was upset with the demo for Battlefront 2. We saw what happened when they were upset with a trailer for Battlefield 5. And do you think that this is basically a case of essentially there's a very small level of patience that the gaming community has, and that this is just one more thing to put people who were already skeptical? I've already seen numerous comments from people saying, after this, I'm going to wait until after launch. I want to see some reviews. I want to see how other people are having with it, but I'm less confident than I was going in. So real quick, Michael, what do you think will happen?
Well, first part of that is, I think it's good for people to wait for launches and wait for things to be released. I think there are people who pre-order, they're expecting things to go off without a hitch, and they really should, but we know they don't. So I think that's okay. I think the other part about this is still in a demo beta stage. This part of this is collecting as much information as they can for how many people they can get logged in the servers, see how the servers handle that and all that. So I think I would have been surprised if it went smoothly, because again, that's not the point. The point is to gather as much information as possible so they can have a smooth launch. To have this many problems, I don't know. It kind of falls into the same problem we get into where a lot of people are invited to these things when maybe they're not ready for that sort of traffic. They're brought in as pre-order rewards, so people are expecting they're going to get a chance to really play it. They run into problems. They go to social media. They express their concerns with it. Again, it's a demo. It's a beta. People shouldn't expect it to go smooth. I think, again, part of that happens to be with the fact that they anxious to get their hands on it, anxious to play it. I still think until we actually see the actual launch to see how it goes, it's hard for us to really put a lot of faith in what they were actually trying to accomplish with this goal. So, I'm always a big fan, particularly now with how people feel, is if you want to wait for it to launch, you don't want to pre-order it, see how it goes, see how the release is, that's fine. I think in a lot of cases, early adopters pay the price because they're stuck with not being able to log in. They're not able to play the way they want to play. And then people who come in a week or 2 weeks or a month later have a completely different experience because that's when they're kind of coming into the game. So again, I personally think, again, the certain issues aside, I think they learned a lot from this. They were able to capture a lot of data of things that are not working, with the hopes is that when they get to the release time, this will be a smoother launch for them.
Okay, Justin, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think, Michael, definitely you hit it on the head. And it's just one of the big reasons they have events like this is so they can kind of test systems, and, they'll take feedback and they'll go back to, and spend more resources and more time, more effort on their network infrastructure. And I don't think that's I don't think that's a big issue. I don't even think that's a very big concern of mine. Like Michael said, I think more people ought to wait until games come out and kind of see what the reception is, maybe see enough gameplay from the final product to kind of determine whether they want a product or not. The tendency for pre-orders and like the pre-order culture it can be detrimental, because people they don't want to feel like they got tricked into anything. And that you can't really say you were tricked into something if the final product comes out and you can definitely see what it is that they're trying that they're marketing to you, and you can make a decision on the final product itself. But to get back to your first question about the state of EA, and we kind of talked a little bit about this either last week or the week before. EA has had a number of I guess problematic releases in the past couple years between, like you said, Battlefield 5 and Battlefront 2, and then also canceling the Star Wars game. So, anecdotally, I was actually talking with a friend of mine the other day, and he had made a comment that he thought that EA was, this was it. This was like its last legs. And the point I made with him was that that's not really how these kind of things go. EA's been around for a long time, and it's a very large company. And we, like I think I mentioned in our last podcast, EA's gone through situations that were tough. The early 2000s were really tough for them. They had a lot of negative publicity and a lot of stereotypes about their company, releasing generic titles, running particular studios into the ground and things like that. And you kind of saw this period where they had a revitalization period. They released Mass Effect, they released Mirror's Edge, they released Dead Space. They took a lot of risky ventures. So no, I don't think that if Anthem doesn't do well, and I think it will do well, but if it doesn't do well, all I really think that's going to end up doing is just kind of pushing EA into a revitalization period where maybe they take some more risky ventures and kind of explore new IPs that are more risky, and perhaps that might be a good thing for them.
Well, remember, we also have the remastered Command & Conquer coming, and I'm definitely looking forward to that because I would like to see more games in the Command & Conquer universe, and I definitely, am curious to see what it would look like with new engines. Now, switching gears, we're going to talk movies and entertainment. So, Michael, you were there last year, and we've got you applied to go and cover it this year. Why don't you give us all a brief rundown of exactly what Cinemacon is? And we have some breaking news this week for it. And we'll go into that in a minute. But why don't you give us a nice little rundown of what it is and why it's so important?
Yeah, so Cinemacon is a convention that brings cinema owners together under one big roof to have the movie studios come to them, show them what's coming out, and again reaffirm their commitment to theaters and the movie-going experience. Right? When we were there last year, obviously all the big studios are there. Everybody from Paramount, Universal, Fox, Disney, Sony, of course, and then
STX,
of course
Lionsgate.
Lionsgate, even Focus, Amazon, even the smaller studios that are kind of getting into the mix. It's star-studded event. I mean, we saw 30, 40 movie stars, everybody from Samuel L. Jackson to pretty much everybody, right? I mean, it's just a way for them to not only show off previews, but also to kind of, again, they're trying to reaffirm their commitment to movie-going experience. They want to say, yes, with all this on-demand stuff coming out, with all this streaming services that are available, we still are going to commit to releasing our movies first in theaters to have that experience and then work to have that sent to streaming services later. So that's kind of what the purpose is, right? And then they have a big event where they kind of go over, top actor, actress for 2018, 19 this year, movie directors, up and coming stars.
Yeah, the awards night's huge.
Yeah, it's huge. And Anna Kendrick's there. We're talking, Jennifer Garner, pretty much Tom Cruise last year was there. And Tom Cruise did an amazing 30-minute presentation where he took a scene from the latest Mission Impossible, went through a whole 30-minute section of it, how they filmed it, the things they had to do to develop for it, happened to do when they were jumping out of the plane, all the stunts that he does. It's just a really exciting experience. And then outside of the movie going, the movie theater, the production studios, all that, they also do the concessions. So you go down into one of the convention center lobbies and one of the rooms there. And then you've got the cotton candy, you've got the drinks, you've got Pepsi there, you've got Nestle there, you've got Coke there, you've got everybody who's doing everything from popcorn to cups, the different plastic cups and that sort of thing. So it's just really a huge convention, bringing all the cinema owners together to show what's coming out for the year, what movies are being released. You get to see, we got to see previews for movies that just came out at the end of this year. And of course, they always have the night vision cameras there to make sure nobody's filming things, and everything. It's just an amazing experience. It's something that you don't really get to experience unless you're part of the cinema franchises. So it's just really a good opportunity to see not only your favorite stars, but also see what's coming in for the big movie production studios to kind of show off what they've got coming up.
Right. And the thing to remember about it, this is not an event for the public. This is an event for the press. This is an event for theater owners, exhibitors, things like that. Michael had mentioned the dealer room. This is where you get everything from, these are new types of seats that are coming. These are new types of projectors that are coming available. We saw pictures last year from your coverage where you guys showed like some of the upcoming themed popcorn cups and stuff for movies that were coming. So this is a pretty big deal. This is not like a traditional show where they go off and sell tickets to the public and everything, because as Michael said, this is there to basically get the studios some time with the various theater owners to say, we're committed to you. This is what we've got coming out. This is why we're excited about it. This is why you should be excited about it. And so it was a bit surprising. To give you an example, in years past, we've had Mark has covered. It's our coverage needs have grown so much that Michael and his wife have added into the coverage for us. Some years Mark has had things like where they showed him an advanced screening of a film several months before it comes out. They've had things where we've had cast interviews. There's a lot going on here. What surprised me this week was reported that Sony has decided that they will not be taking part in Cinemacon. Now, this is a little bit surprising, and I'll give you guys a little bit of context before we discuss it. This is not like Sony saying we're not going to be at E3 because, as speculation is, they're working on a new console. They do not have the situation right for them to make the announcement, or maybe they want to make it at their own event. There's all sorts of speculation that maybe they'll make an announcement before E3. Maybe they'll make an announcement simultaneous to E3. And then a lot of other people are saying, no, they'll probably go through E3, Gamescom, Paris Games Week, Tokyo Game Show. Won't do anything there. They'll either do it on their own or they'll do it at PlayStation Experience, assuming they hold one again this December. Now, what's got everyone's so going, about this is that they have Spider-Man Far From Home, Men in Black International, and Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Those are three major releases. They are not showing up at this event to promote their thing to theater owners and franchises. Justin, we'll start with you. What do you make of this?
Yeah, it's kind of perplexing because, with the Sony thing, we kind of reasoned that, or Sony and E3 thing, we kind of reasoned that maybe, or at least I reasoned that they just had a very strong year of a lot of exclusives, and maybe by the time E3 rolls around, they might not have their next set of exclusives for PS4 in a state that that they think is ready for a full E3 showcase. That was my thought on it. Maybe, they were kind of going, my thought is that they're probably going the Nintendo route, that they'll probably kind of do things on their own timetable, and they'll probably have events scattered throughout the year when these games are in a more complete shape and a little closer to release. Sure. With the films, though, it's kind of perplexing that they're skipping this event for the reasons you just outlined, that they have actually a pretty good slate of movies coming out this year. So I'm not really kind of sure why they're skipping this event, and it's hard to kind of speculate exactly what reason they might have. Personally, I think it's important. Cinemacon what it stands for is very important to me. I think the movie going experience is important, and supporting it is important. So it's hard to say. I mean, maybe their marketing is concerned that it might be overshadowed by other things that are announced there, but I think the other thing we were going to talk about is that Fox also might not be there. Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of odd, that this year we seem to have a lot of conventions and other events kind of having big shakeups, particularly from Sony. But with Fox, I guess it sort of makes sense because of the Disney merger. That's going to throw a wrench in a lot of the decisions Fox makes as a company. But with Sony, it's kind of, I'm not really sure why they're making all these decisions. So I'd be curious to hear your guys' theories on that.
Yeah, and we'll get to your take on that, Michael, in a minute. Justin, you mentioned the Fox situation, and that's exactly it, because I was going to bring that up after we did this segment, but it's a natural time to put that in. Fox has basically said they are not sure if they are going to attend or if they're going to fold their presentation as part of the Disney showcase, or what's going on, and that is understandable. They're in the process of a mega merger. This is, I don't remember in my lifetime when two gigantic film studios of this level. I mean, we've had, like Columbia and Sony and various other ones, but these are two massive studios combining into one. So it's understandable. There's so many people, and I am sure there's all sorts of people going around in business decisions. We've heard that February or March is now the new timetable for when this is all supposed to be finalized. And I get that. I'm sure that if you were trying to take a cynical approach, some might say, I think they have bigger things to worry about than who's doing what stage show and so on and so forth, because they're probably trying to say, we got to be locked in and ready to go for when San Diego Comic-Con and above all the D23 Expo comes around, when we have to be able to present the united front, so on and so forth. And I'm sure that takes a lot of work. You also have that whole issue with, films that are in the works right now. Is there a situation where Fox is running it? My guess is they probably have to, anything related to essentially future business probably has to go through a liaison at Disney, or who knows, or maybe it's a case of Fox can do certain things. Either way, but getting back to Sony, because that is what the whole crux of this is. They went to Brazil Comic-Con. We talked about that a few weeks ago. They brought out Men in Black International. They brought out Spider-Man Far From Home, debuted the trailer there, brought the stars there. Brazil. But this big showcase in the middle of Las Vegas, they opted out of. One's a fan bit, one's a showcase one. Now, is this a simple case of, we know these things are going to do all right? See, I could see that for Spider-Man. But then there's this part of me saying, the last Men in Black did not go as well as they had hoped. They are essentially rebooting the whole franchise here. Maybe this is the time that you need to get the theater owners on your side and excited. I'm guessing this is, this to me sounds like they're so confident that they feel they don't need to do this. But as we've talked about, when you're the only studio sitting out, that is going to be noticed. And I am sure there are other studios, especially smaller ones, that are sitting there going, oh boy, here we go. Here's a chance to take some headlines, especially rival studios that are going to be looking to put superhero films that would be roughly in the window of Spider-Man. I mean, I know they're all Marvel at this point, but, Spider-Man, Avengers, Endgame, got Captain Marvel, now all of a sudden, while we know it's coming, X-Men Dark Phoenix, which may or may not be there because of Fox, you've got this hole in the lineup, and I can't believe that someone's sitting there not thinking this is a golden opportunity for us to take some of the spotlight away. So, Michael, close this one out for us, please.
Yeah, so this is perplexing because, again, you mentioned this isn't a fan show where anybody can buy tickets. This is theater owners worldwide. Again, this isn't just the U.S. This is worldwide theater owners. And these are people that are essentially deciding how many screens they're going to show your movies on. Last year, Sony brought Quentin Tarantino, Leonardo DiCaprio, Philip Lord, Christopher Miller. I mean, these are huge people they brought in last year. So they obviously showed how important it was. And again, they weren't the only studio. Obviously, all these other ones that brought them in too. So I'm really struggling to try to understand what their goal is with this. I understand they're sitting pretty now with PlayStation 4. Into the Spider-Verse obviously got massive awards, got massive recognition. I understand Sony Pictures in general, and they always talk about their commitment to that, right? Their commitment to Sony Animation, their commitment to Sony Pictures, their commitment to PlayStation. That's all we heard when we were at CES. And then they do things like they pull out of E3, they pull out of CinemaCon, and these are events that cater again to not only to the fans but to the industry as well. I don't know. I mean, yes, I understand trade shows are expensive. Maybe they don't feel they're getting, or either they don't feel they're getting their money worth out of it, or maybe they feel they don't need to be there because the studio owners are going to have their movies in the theater anyways. Again, I want to assume there's some grand scheme that Sony has for doing all these things this year, and they're going to maybe have their own mega convention where they're not going to do just games, but maybe they're going to do a movies, animation. Maybe they're going to roll into one big studio type showcase, kind of like they do with this Sony experience, but actually do it on more than just a game level. But it's really odd that we see them pull out of E3, pull out of CinemaCon, and then they go to Brazil. And again, nothing against Brazil, but it's not exactly the mecca for all the folks who are going to be coming to, to present for your theaters, or for all the major stars are going to be showing up, and all your fan base is going to be there. So all in all, it's just a really odd decision for them. Now, from a Fox perspective, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, from a Fox perspective, I understand that as well, because I could see them merging into Disney and doing just one show. Fox was huge last year. We got to see the Predator premiere long before anybody else did, long before it was released. And then obviously the Disney show was short. They didn't bring any stars. Again, they had a lot of stuff going on, but I think most of their stars were probably on set filming for things like various Avengers movies and that sort of thing. So yeah, I can understand that move a bit more with Fox saying we don't know how we're gonna do this year, but the Sony thing is still very perplexing.
Yeah, and the thing about it too is not knowing about the finances of how CinemaCon works in terms of are these studios invited, or do they? Well, I mean, obviously they're invited, but there's certain conventions where studios have to pay for their booth space, for their panels. There are some where they're invited and stuff like that. You talked about the cost effectiveness and that, because you're looking at bringing in, you have to figure out your stage presentation. You have to book your hotel rooms. You have to do, flights and room and board, and then you have to bring the stars out and work around the various schedules. And that part I understand. But of course, the argument is, well, the other studios are doing it, and it's factored in as a cost of doing business. There is a side to the theaters that I guess a lot of the public may not be aware of. And we heard about this from one of the theater owners in Arizona, Dan Harkins, that was talking about this a few years ago at a convention, but in a very simplified way of a very complicated process. One of the reasons popcorns cost what they do, Cokes cost what they do, is that when a movie comes out, there's usually an arrangement with the studio, and in terms of they'll say, for example, we will take, and I'm just throwing out random numbers, but from what I understand, these are in the ballpark. They'll say, like, for the first week we get 85% of the ticket sales if it's going to be a big box office. The second week we take 75%, and then the numbers drop accordingly. And this becomes an issue when you have certain massive blockbusters like Star Wars, like the Bond films, things that are expected to do very well. And, the conversation was that sometimes the studio wants a larger bit up front, and they want that level that they established to hold for more weeks instead of dropping at a quicker pace. So in some cases, you're sitting there going, I'm giving away 75, 80% of my ticket sales for the first month of this film. And then basically, if it's still in the theater and it's still drawing, after week 4, then I'm looking at a 50-50 split. And of course, he said, sometimes you have a back and forth. And there are times when you basically, I remember The Watch was an example. We actually screened that at one of their theaters, but they could not come to an agreement with Fox over the distribution fees. So therefore, their chain did not carry the film. And, part of this is that when you show off the film, and I know that there are people saying, well, I'm sure they send people out to the studios to see it, or they're private screeners and that. But part of this is to get people excited, to get theater owners to see the footage up there on the screen, to have an audience of their fellow peers as well as the media judging the reaction of these clips and saying, wow, people are excited. Because, Michael, we've had movies that we've said, we think this is going to be huge. We've gone to screeners and the audience is just like, yeah, whatever. And then we've had things that we thought were not going to be that great, and the audience went absolutely crazy for it. And that's part of it, like you said. That's the kind of reaction that these theater owners need, to say, you know what, yeah, we are going to add, an extra 1,000 screens of distribution to it, or, you know what, this is not getting the response we needed. We're going to cut the number of screens it's going to release on. This is where the studios can sometimes say, maybe we need to move it up a couple weeks. Maybe we need to move it back. So very questionable, and I'm curious what the long-term ramifications of this are going to be. Well, guys, we certainly covered a lot of topics. I know next week we have even more convention news to talk about, as well as the breaking news. So hopefully we'll have some more stuff. There's a part of me saying, I wonder, the fact that Sony apparently has already come out and confirmed this, there was a part of me wondering if this was just a negotiation ploy, like, something as simple as, now, Michael, they all use the same theater for their showcases, correct?
They do. It's all
right.
in Caesar's.
Right. I wasn't sure if they had separate theaters, but you all go into. I know you don't go in at the same time, but I wasn't sure if it's there's hall A, B, and C, and so on and so forth. And maybe it could be something as simple as someone said, "Oh, you know what? I don't like my time slot. You put so and so here when we always go here, and maybe I don't want this studio going first." But these are all things that are all figured out, and the whole argument is, I've always said, don't be first, be last, because then you know what you're shooting for to top them. And if you have a strong enough lineup, and that was my first thought. Maybe it was just a simple matter of maybe they weren't happy with the time of their showcase. Maybe certain talent wasn't available. Maybe there was some financial thing. Who knows? Let's hope, because I definitely think it's going to make a very large absence into what is otherwise an incredible looking convention. Well, folks, that's going to do it for us this week. You take care, and we'll talk to you next week. You have a good one.
All right, got it.
Awesome.